When we look closely at hair loss in young people, the first impulse is to search for a complex explanation. Genetics, hormones, stress, pollution, everything except the most obvious factor, how we eat. What consistently appears, both clinically and behaviorally, is that the most damaging mistake is not what people eat, but how little and how restrictively they eat. As clinicians like Dr. Gary Linkov have pointed out, extreme dieting places the body in a state of perceived threat. And when the body feels threatened, it does not prioritize beauty, density, or hair growth. It prioritizes survival. From a biological standpoint, this makes perfect sense. Hair is not essential. You can live without it. So the moment the body senses scarcity, whether from cutting calories, skipping meals, eliminating entire food groups, or following rigid dietary rules, it adapts. Why? It slows down systems that are non-essential. Hair follicles shift out of growth mode, not because something is broken, but because something is being protected. The tragedy is that many young people interpret this intelligent response as failure, when in reality it is the body doing exactly what it was designed to do. But this issue cannot be understood purely through biology. There is a psychological dimension that runs just as deep. Restrictive eating is rarely neutral. It often carries emotional weight, control, self-judgment, fear of gaining weight, fear of losing identity, fear of not being acceptable. Food becomes a battlefield rather than nourishment. And the body, which does not understand social trends or aesthetic ideals, only understands signals. When nourishment becomes inconsistent, the signal is clear danger. Philosophically, this reveals something important about our relationship with health. Many people believe discipline means denying the body, pushing through discomfort, ignoring signals. Why? But the body does not reward punishment. It responds to coherence. When we fight it, it adapts defensively. When we support it, it invests in growth. Hair loss in this context is not random. It is communication. It is the body saying, I don't feel safe enough to grow. What makes this especially deceptive is timing. Hair loss often appears months after the dietary change. So the mind disconnects cause and effect. The person says, I'm eating better now, without realizing the system is still responding to the earlier period of deprivation. Biology keeps memory. The follicle remembers stress long after the mind has moved on. The deeper lesson here is not about hair alone. It is about trust. When you nourish consistently, when you stop oscillating between extremes, when you eat enough without guilt, the body exits survival mode. Hormones stabilize, inflammation quiets, growth becomes possible again, not forced, allowed. So the real question is not, how do I stop hair loss? The real question is, am I creating safety in my body, or am I constantly asking it to defend itself? Because hair does not fall out to betray you. It falls out to tell you the truth. Once we understand that restriction places the body in survival mode, the next layer becomes unavoidable protein. Not as a trend, not as a gym concept, but as a biological requirement. Hair is not an abstract structure. It is made of keratin, a protein-based fiber. When protein intake is insufficient, hair loss is not mysterious. It is logical, and this is where many young people, often with the best intentions, unknowingly undermine themselves. Clinically, this point is emphasized by specialists such as Dr. Gary Linkov. Why? Who repeatedly observed that patients with early hair thinning are not eating enough protein for their body's needs. What's important to understand is that the body does not distribute protein equally. It prioritizes survival first. Muscles, enzymes, hormones, immune function, all of these come before hair. Hair only receives what is left over. So when intake is low, hair doesn't protest loudly. It simply stops showing up. But protein deficiency is rarely just nutritional. It often reflects a deeper misunderstanding of nourishment. Many young people replace real meals with snacks, carbohydrates, sugar, caffeine. Others follow plant-based or weight loss diets without understanding how to properly combine foods. On paper, they are eating. In reality, they are underfeeding the very systems that require rebuilding every day. Hair follicles are among the most metabolically active cells in the body. They cannot run on intention. They require material. There is also a psychological pattern here that deserves attention. Protein symbolizes structure, repair, stability. When someone chronically avoids it, it often mirrors a life rhythm that lacks grounding, irregular meals, irregular sleep, constant stimulation, little recovery. The body reflects the mind. Fragmented nourishment creates fragmented signals. Hair, once again, becomes the messenger. What confuses people is that protein deficiency does not always look dramatic. You can feel energetic, functional, even productive. Why? But hair growth is slow and cumulative. It reveals imbalances over time, not overnight. That's why someone can suddenly notice thinning and feel shocked, saying, "But I feel fine." The body may be coping, but hair growth requires abundance, not coping. Philosophically, this forces a shift in perspective. Growth does not happen in scarcity. Creation does not occur in minimalism pushed too far. Whether we're talking about hair, creativity, or emotional resilience, the principle is the same: what you want to grow must be fed. When we consistently give the body just enough to survive, it will do exactly that: survive, nothing more. The solution here is not obsession. It is respect. Eating adequate protein daily from sources the body can recognize and use sends a powerful signal of safety and stability. Over time, that signal changes everything. Hormones respond, tissue regenerates. Hair follicles re-enter growth not because they are forced to, but because conditions finally allow it. So if restriction teaches the body to protect, protein teaches it to build. And hair, why, which only grows when the body feels supported, will always follow that lesson. After restriction and protein deficiency, the next silent driver of hair loss in young people is far less obvious because it feels normal, convenient, and socially accepted: ultra-processed food. Sugar, refined carbohydrates, industrial seed oils, packaged snacks, fast food. These are not just poor nutritional choices. They are biochemical signals, and the message they send to the body is instability. From a medical perspective, clinicians such as Dr. Gary Linkov frequently point out that chronic inflammation and insulin dysregulation play a direct role in hair thinning. But what matters more than the terminology is understanding the mechanism. Ultra-processed foods create rapid spikes in blood sugar, followed by sharp drops. The body responds with stress hormones. Repeat this cycle daily, and the system never fully settles. Hair follicles, which depend on a calm, well-regulated internal environment, are among the first to react. Hair growth operates in cycles. It requires stability to remain in the growth phase. Inflammation shortens that phase. It quietly pushes follicles into rest and eventually into shedding. This doesn't happen dramatically. It happens subtly over months while life continues as usual. That's why so many young people say, "I eat all the time," yet their hair tells a different story. Frequency is mistaken for nourishment. Psychologically, ultra-processed food plays a deeper role. These foods are designed for stimulation, not satisfaction. They bypass natural hunger cues and create a loop of craving and reward. The mind feels temporarily soothed, but the body experiences chaos. This creates an internal contradiction: emotional comfort paired with physiological stress. And once again, hair becomes the translator of that conflict. There's also a philosophical dimension worth reflecting on. Ultra-processed food represents speed, fast energy, fast pleasure, fast convenience. Hair growth represents patience. It is slow, cumulative, and unforgiving of shortcuts. You cannot rush biology without paying a price. When a lifestyle prioritizes immediacy, the body adapts by conserving energy where it can. Growth is postponed. What makes this particularly deceptive is that inflammation doesn't always feel like illness. You can be young, active, and functional while living in a low-grade inflammatory state. But hair follicles are exquisitely sensitive. They respond to the internal environment, not to how motivated or busy you feel. When inflammation becomes the background noise of daily life, hair quietly steps back. The solution is not perfection, and it is certainly not fear. It is awareness. Whole foods, those that stabilize blood sugar, reduce inflammatory load, and provide micronutrients, send a radically different signal to the body. They communicate safety, and when the body feels safe, it allows systems like hair growth to continue uninterrupted. This brings us back to a central truth: hair loss is not an isolated event. It is a reflection of internal rhythm. When the rhythm is chaotic, growth pauses. When the rhythm becomes coherent, growth resumes. So if restrictive eating teaches the body to defend and protein teaches it to build, ultra-processed food teaches it to stay on alert. And a body that is always on alert will never prioritize growth, especially something as honest and as revealing as hair. Once inflammation and instability enter the system, Another layer quietly reveals itself: micronutrient depletion. This is where many young people become genuinely confused, because on the surface they appear healthy, they eat regularly, they function well, their blood work may even fall within normal ranges, and yet hair continues to thin. What's often missing are not calories or even protein, but the small, essential elements that allow growth to happen at a cellular level. Clinicians like Dr. Gary Linkov frequently highlight deficiencies in iron, zinc, vitamin D, and B complex vitamins among patients with early hair loss. These nutrients are not optional accessories, they are signals. Iron delivers oxygen to the follicle. Zinc regulates repair and cell division. B vitamins support energy metabolism. Vitamin D acts more like a hormone than a vitamin, influencing the hair cycle itself. When these are low, the follicle doesn't panic, it downshifts. What makes micronutrient deficiency especially deceptive is that the body is remarkably good at compensating. It will redirect these nutrients to where they are most urgently needed: red blood cells, immune function, neurological processes. Hair receives what remains. And when there is nothing left to spare, hair doesn't break down dramatically. It simply stops renewing. Thinning becomes gradual, almost invisible at first, until one day it's impossible to ignore. There is also a psychological illusion at play. Many young people believe that eating clean automatically means eating sufficiently, but cleanliness does not equal completeness. A diet can be low in calories, low in variety, and low in micronutrients while still appearing disciplined or healthy. This creates a sense of moral success paired with biological deficit. The mind feels in control. The body feels deprived. Philosophically, micronutrients represent the subtlety of life. They remind us that growth depends not just on big actions, but on small, consistent inputs. Hair growth is not fueled by extremes. It depends on quiet adequacy, repeated daily. When we ignore the small things, the body responds in small ways at first, until the accumulation becomes visible. Another important factor is absorption. Stress, inflammation, and gut imbalance can reduce the body's ability to absorb nutrients even when intake seems adequate. This creates a paradox: you're eating, but not receiving. Hair follicles sense reception, not intention. They respond to what arrives, not to what you believe you're providing. The solution is not to chase supplements blindly, but to restore coherence. Nutrient-dense foods, variety, adequate intake, and a calm internal environment allow these micronutrients to reach their destination. Over time, the follicle regains confidence. Growth resumes when the message changes from scarcity to sufficiency. This leads to a deeper understanding: hair loss in young people is rarely about one missing pill or one lab value. It is about cumulative neglect of the small essentials, and life, whether biological or psychological, does not collapse from one major mistake. It erodes from many tiny omissions. Why? When the body no longer has to choose where to sacrifice, it stops sacrificing hair. At this point, when restriction, protein deficiency, inflammation, and micronutrient gaps have already done their quiet work, we arrive at a place that connects all of them: the gut. This is where many people finally realize that hair loss is not just about what you eat, but about what your body is actually able to receive. You can be doing many things right on paper and still be operating in deficit if absorption is compromised. Clinicians such as Dr. Gary Linkov often emphasize that gut health plays a critical role in hair biology, not because the gut directly grows hair, but because it decides what reaches the bloodstream. The gut is not a passive tube. It is an intelligent interface between the external world and your internal environment. When it is inflamed, stressed, or imbalanced, nutrients pass through without being fully absorbed. Hair follicles don't respond to what you swallow, they respond to what arrives. This explains a very common frustration. Someone improves their diet, adds supplements, eats more consistently, yet hair loss continues. The assumption is that the approach isn't working. In reality, the system that distributes resources is still compromised. Chronic stress, ultra-processed foods, irregular eating, antibiotics, and long-term inflammation all alter the gut environment. Over time, this reduces absorption efficiency and increases immune activation. The body stays vigilant. Hair growth once again becomes negotiable. Psychologically, the gut is deeply symbolic. It represents integration, our ability to take in, process, and assimilate life. When someone lives in constant urgency, tension, or emotional conflict, digestion suffers. This isn't poetic language, it's physiological. Stress diverts blood flow away from digestion. Enzymes decrease. Absorption declines. The body chooses defense over digestion, and hair follicles, sensitive as they are, detect that choice. There is also a philosophical lesson hidden here. Why? Many people try to solve hair loss by adding more products, more supplements, more interventions. But the issue is often not addition, it is congestion. When the gut is overwhelmed, even good inputs become noise. Growth requires clarity. Assimilation requires calm. What restores gut health is rarely dramatic. It is rhythm, regular meals, whole foods, adequate chewing, reduced stimulants, fewer inflammatory triggers. Most importantly, a nervous system that is not constantly bracing for impact. When the gut senses safety, absorption improves. When absorption improves, nutrients reach the follicle. When the follicle feels supported, growth becomes possible again. This also reframes hair loss as a systems issue rather than a surface problem. The body is not fragmented. Why? The gut, the brain, the immune system, and the hair follicle are in constant conversation. You cannot create growth at the edge while chaos exists at the center. So if earlier we said restriction teaches the body to defend, protein teaches it to build, inflammation keeps it on alert, and micronutrients provide the tools, then gut health determines whether any of those messages are actually delivered. And this is the deeper truth: when the body cannot properly receive, it will eventually stop trying to grow. When all these pieces are placed together, restriction, protein deficiency, inflammation, micronutrient gaps, and gut dysfunction, the final realization becomes unavoidable. Hair loss is not the problem. It is the signal. Especially in young people, hair loss is rarely a random cosmetic inconvenience. It is a biological message asking to be interpreted, not silenced. This is why specialists like Dr. Gary Linkov consistently emphasize looking beyond surface treatments. Medications and procedures can be useful tools. Why? But when they are applied without understanding the underlying message, they often become temporary solutions to a persistent cause. Hair follicles do not operate in isolation. They respond to the internal environment, to hormones, nutrients, inflammation, and stress levels. When that environment is hostile or unstable, hair loss becomes a rational outcome. Psychologically, this is where resistance often appears. Many people want hair loss to be an external enemy, something to fight, suppress, or outsmart. But the body doesn't work through opposition. It works through coherence. Hair loss is not attacking you, it is informing you. It's saying that something deeper is misaligned, that the system is compensating, adapting, and protecting itself in ways that may be inconvenient but are never accidental. There is also a philosophical humility required here. Youth creates the illusion of invulnerability. When hair begins to thin early, it feels unfair, even threatening. But in reality, it is an early warning system. Long before chronic disease, metabolic dysfunction, or hormonal collapse appear, hair responds. It is honest and it is fast. Seen this way, early hair loss is not bad news. It is timely information. The danger lies in ignoring the signal. When hair loss is treated as purely cosmetic, the deeper imbalance continues. The body learns that its messages are not being listened to, so it speaks louder through fatigue, anxiety, digestive issues, hormonal disruption. Hair loss was simply the first whisper. This reframing changes everything. Instead of asking, "How do I stop hair loss?" the more intelligent question becomes, what is my body adapting to? That question opens space for responsibility without blame. It invites curiosity rather than panic, and it shifts the focus from control to understanding. Biologically, when the internal environment becomes supportive, when nourishment is adequate, inflammation is reduced, digestion improves, and stress is regulated, the body often restores functions that were put on hold. Hair growth does not need to be forced. It needs permission. Permission comes when survival mode ends. This is why addressing hair loss early through diet and lifestyle is not just about appearance. Why? It is preventative medicine. It is listening while the body is still whispering, instead of waiting until it has to shout. And perhaps this is the most important takeaway. The body always chooses survival first, growth second. When you see hair falling, you are witnessing intelligence at work, not failure. So the real invitation is simple but profound. Stop fighting the symptom and start understanding the message. Because when the body feels heard, it no longer needs to speak through loss.